I shelled out an extra $12,000 for what I was sold as the safest neighborhood in the state, only to have Karen turn it into a ruthless battleground. By day 30, she had the audacity to fine me for unauthorized daffodils. By day 45, heavy construction trucks were ravaging my driveway. And when I fought back, she sent the cops to my door. This is the grim tale of how a 42-year-old HOA president armed with a clipboard and a personal vendetta transformed my dream home into a war zone, and why I risked everything to expose the festering corruption eating away at our community. The day I moved into Willow Creek Estates should have been a triumph. My new house boasted a sprawling yard, tree-lined streets, and the serene promise of suburban peace. The "Welcome to Willow Creek" basket sitting on my doorstep initially looked like a warm embrace, until I discovered a hefty bundle of HOA bylaws hidden beneath the muffins, with Karen's name underlined twice. They said Willow Creek was the kind of place where neighbors greeted each other with genuine smiles, but my first days shattered that illusion. A hushed warning from one neighbor to keep up appearances, and another's whispered admonition that questioning the president's decisions was strictly forbidden, set off alarms in my mind. I dismissed these murmurs as mere exaggeration, never imagining the extent of one tyrant's power. I soon learned how wrong I was. Within just 2 weeks, Karen's imprint was stamped on every official notice. Clad in floral dresses that couldn't disguise her icy ruthlessness, she commanded with a piercing gaze and a voice as relentless as military drill sergeants. At our very first HOA meeting, she stood at the podium, clutching her clipboard like a weapon, as she rattled off a list of improvements designed to drain our wallets. Her words were curt, her tone void of empathy, every syllable a decree of domination. When I dared to raise my hand and ask how these exorbitant fees were calculated, the pleasant masquerade crumbled. In a heartbeat, her warm smile vanished, replaced by a glare so bone-chilling it nearly made me drop my notes. "We all contribute equally," she snarled, as if reciting an unchallengeable edict. My polite request for a detailed breakdown only deepened the frost in her eyes. I instantly realized that even a gentle inquiry marked me as a target. That was only the beginning of her violent transformation from polite enforcer to merciless overseer. In my desperate bid to stay in her good graces, I planted a modest display of flowers in my yard. A few daffodils, a couple of rose bushes. A week later, a notice arrived, a fine for unauthorized daffodils. It wasn't an enormous sum, but the principle ignited a fury inside me. There was no rule in the bylaws about daffodils, yet Karen's iron fist imposed her own twisted regulations. As if that weren't enough, construction trucks from a nearby development began using my driveway as a shortcut, vicious machines leaving fresh scars in the form of tire ruts and cracked concrete. When I confronted the foreman, his half-hearted apology did nothing to stop the relentless invasion. The trucks kept on coming, a constant reminder of the chaos that now reigned over what was supposed to be my sanctuary. So, I put up a simple chain across my driveway to stop them. Within 24 hours, Karen showed up. "That chain violates neighborhood aesthetics," she snapped. "Remove it immediately." "They're trespassing," I said, trying to stay calm. "I'm allowed to protect my own property." She waved her clipboard at me like a sword. "We'll see about that." I thought $500 fines were bad. Then I learned what happens when you humiliate a dictator at her own meeting. "Officers, this is private property. She has no right to remove my chain." The cops looked uncomfortable. Karen stammered something about community standards. With no evidence of a crime, the officers left. Her glare could have scorched my lawn on the spot. That night, I discovered the chain had been cut. Furious, I installed a security camera. The next morning, the footage showed Karen herself, under cover of darkness, snipping the chain with 2 men I recognized as the construction foreman's crew. Armed with evidence, I decided to confront her at the next HOA meeting. Walking into that meeting, I felt a mix of anger and determination. Karen stood at the front, her usual smug posture on full display. The typical announcements droned on, landscaping fees, minor noise complaints, until the floor opened for questions. I raised my hand. "I have an issue," I said, plugging in my laptop to the projector. Karen's confident smirk flickered as the screen lit up. Then I played the footage. Karen, in the dead of night, cutting my chain with the help of 2 construction workers. Gasps filled the room. "That's a violation of my privacy," Karen shrieked. "You can't just record people." "It's my property," I replied. "I can record suspicious activity. You're trespassing and vandalizing." Neighbors murmured and nodded. A few brave souls piped up with their own grievances. Someone demanded to know where the HOA's money was going. Another questioned Karen's authority to impose random fines. Chaos erupted. Karen's face went red as more neighbors accused her of heavy-handed tactics. By the end of the meeting, the board agreed to an independent audit of HOA finances. Karen stormed out. The tension was so thick I could practically taste it. That night, I woke to the sound of shattering glass. My car windshield had been smashed. A scribbled note under the wiper read, "Back off or else." The police filed it under possible teenage vandalism, but I suspected Karen or her cronies. A review of my security footage showed the same construction workers lurking near my property. It was time to escalate. I contacted Samantha Hayes, an investigative journalist known for exposing shady local politics. I emailed her the footage, the fines, the chain-cutting incident. She responded within hours. "This could be a major story," she said when we met. "HOA corruption isn't new, but this is extreme." We started digging into public records. Lo and behold, Karen's husband ran a shell corporation that had suspicious payments linked to the construction company. It wasn't just unethical, it looked criminal. For most people, the next step would be to call the cops again. But I knew Karen would spin it. Instead, I teamed up with Samantha to gather more proof. I thought my biggest problem was $500 fines and a shattered windshield, until a drone started hovering outside my bedroom window. Its camera lens glinted in the moonlight. Furious, I grabbed a flashlight and aimed it at the drone. It zipped away. The next morning, my security footage showed Karen retrieving it from the park. Unapproved surveillance? She'd once accused me. But apparently it was fine when she spied on me. When I confronted her, loudly, in front of neighbors, she lost her cool and called the police again. This time, they warned her about trespassing and harassment charges. Meanwhile, Samantha published her first exposé, "Corruption in Willow Creek, HOA President's Dirty Deals." It went viral in our county, and soon reporters were asking neighbors about Karen's questionable tactics. Under mounting pressure, the HOA board held an emergency meeting. Tension crackled in the air. Karen marched in late, looking rattled but trying to hide it. "These accusations are baseless," she began. "Everything I've done is for the betterment of Willow Creek Estates." I couldn't hold back. "Betterment? You mean lining your pockets with construction kickbacks?" Her face turned scarlet. "You have no idea what you're talking about." "Then why were your payments hidden?" Samantha chimed in, stepping forward. She had copies of bank transfers linking Karen's husband's shell corporation to the construction company. A chorus of angry voices erupted. Someone yelled about skyrocketing HOA fees. Another demanded Karen's resignation. The uproar ended with a unanimous vote to suspend her pending further investigation. I hoped that would be the turning point, that the worst was over. But as I left the building, I felt eyes on me. My intuition screamed that Karen wasn't finished. The next morning, I opened my mailbox to find a plain envelope with a typewritten note. "Drop this now. You don't know who you're dealing with." I showed it to the police, but they offered little more than a shrug. "Could be a prank," they said. I wasn't convinced. One night, I spotted an unfamiliar car idling down the street, headlights off. I snapped a photo before it sped away. Through Samantha's contacts, we traced the license plate to one of the contractors who had helped Karen cut my chain. Clearly, they were still lurking. Then came the worst blow yet. Around midnight, I awoke to the sound of a loud crash and smelled smoke. My brand new shed in the backyard where the fence had been repaired was engulfed in flames. I managed to douse some of it with a fire extinguisher before the fire department arrived. The chief confirmed what I suspected. Accelerant had been used. This was arson. "That note wasn't paper, it was gasoline," I muttered bitterly, staring at the charred remains. I'd spent years saving for this house. Now, I'd burn it down myself to end this. Samantha refused to let the arson intimidate her. She connected it to a string of fires linked to the same construction firm. Turns out that company had a track record of strong-arming homeowners who stood in their way. By now, Karen was suspended from the HOA, but her influence lingered like a bad smell. We uncovered more evidence of forged documents, unauthorized fines, and personal expenses billed to the HOA. The deeper we dug, the more we realized we were dealing with a broad conspiracy, and Karen was only one piece of the puzzle. Still, she'd been the face of this corruption, and the entire scheme was unraveling fast. The local authorities finally took notice. Police started questioning not just Karen, but also her husband and the lead construction manager. Even though Karen was out, the HOA needed to be rebuilt from the inside. An interim board tried to bring residents together. Town hall meetings replaced Karen's old autocratic style. People shared how Karen had bullied them into paying for repairs that should have been covered by community funds. Mrs. Harper tearfully recounted how she'd spent thousands she didn't have, all under Karen's threatening letters. She told me if I didn't comply, my home would be considered in violation, Mrs. Harper sobbed. The new board was transparent, hiring independent auditors to review every penny of HOA spending. Samantha reported on these changes, shining a spotlight on how a once docile neighborhood was reclaiming its voice. Neighbors still had doubts and trust wouldn't come easy, but the gloom that hung over Willow Creek Estates began to lift. Yards were tidied again, small gatherings sparked new friendships, and people started to believe that maybe, just maybe, we could move forward without fear of Karen's retaliation. In the midst of this transition, some neighbors urged me to run for the HOA board. "You stood up to Karen," they said. "We need that kind of backbone." At first, I hesitated. After everything I'd been through, diving into the administrative side of the HOA felt like volunteering for another nightmare. But I realized that real change only happens when people are willing to lead. So I launched a grassroots campaign promising openness and fairness. I held informal gatherings in my backyard, still blackened from the arson attempt, where neighbors could voice concerns. The turnout surprised me. Folks were hungry for honesty after months, maybe years, of Karen's manipulations. Election day came, and I won by a landslide. My first goal was to reverse any fines that had been improperly issued. Then I proposed a new dispute resolution system that prioritized dialogue over punishment. The old board's secrecy was replaced with a community forum where residents could vote on big decisions. For the first time, Willow Creek Estates felt like it truly belonged to all of us. Despite the positive shifts, Karen's legal case loomed in the background. Samantha's expose had gone viral, and the police investigation was in full force, but Karen's lawyers tried every trick to delay the proceedings. Meanwhile, we kept encountering signs that someone, or several someones, were determined to keep the old guard's power alive. I'd see that suspicious car parked near my house. Anonymous notes would appear in my mailbox, warning me to stop. Once, late at night, someone pounded on my windows, then ran off before I could see who it was. It was a psychological game, a constant reminder that Karen's network wasn't above terrorizing me. Still, I refused to budge. "Chains can't stop a woman who rewrites rules over Pinot Grigio," I muttered to a neighbor once, trying to find humor in the chaos. But I remained vigilant, doubling down on security measures. The mental toll was severe. Some nights I found myself jolting awake at every creak in the house. Finally, after months of legal wrangling, Karen's court date arrived. Media vans lined the courthouse parking lot. Neighbors, once too afraid to speak, crowded into the gallery. Samantha and I both testified. The prosecution's evidence was overwhelming. Forged HOA documents, suspicious money transfers, testimonies about intimidation and vandalism, and of course, the security footage of Karen literally cutting my chain. The construction company executives faced charges as well, some of them pleading guilty to avoid harsher sentences. Karen tried to portray herself as a victim, a pawn in a bigger corporate scheme, but nobody was buying it. The jury listened intently to each piece of evidence, and over the course of several weeks, her defense crumbled. "She wasn't always like this," Karen's husband muttered to me in the hallway one afternoon. He looked defeated, as if watching his world collapse. He handed me a folded letter, Karen's resignation from the HOA board. "I'm sorry," he whispered. It was a strange moment. Part of me felt a flicker of pity. But it was drowned out by memories of the vandalism, the threats, the arson. When the verdict came down, guilty on embezzlement, conspiracy, and multiple counts of vandalism, Karen's composure finally cracked. She received a prison sentence. The construction company faced hefty fines and was barred from further projects in our area. Samantha's articles had captured national attention, igniting debates about the unchecked power of HOAs even as I wrestled with my own mixed feelings. While other victories sparked pure triumph, this one left me caught between a surge of relief and a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. I'd emerged victorious, yet in its wake lay shattered windows, a burned-out shed, and relentless stress that made every moment bittersweet. The community did rally around me, and together we embarked on a slow journey toward healing, a process that, while promising, stirred doubts as each scar reminded me of what we'd lost. With Karen out of the picture, the HOA slowly rebuilt its credibility under a fresh board. Finances began to be openly reported, major decisions came down to direct votes, and the oppressive fear that had once gripped Willow Creek Estates began to ebb away. Sidewalks were patched up, the park cleaned, and we even hosted a neighborhood barbecue, an event that felt both refreshing and strangely surreal after the dark days of Karen's rule. Yet even as these changes unfolded, I couldn't help but wonder if the wounds we carried would ever fully heal. I served my term on the board before stepping down, worn out by the fight yet proud of the stand we'd taken against bullying and corruption. My driveway chain, a small symbol of defiance, remained intact as a constant reminder that though I had fought hard, the price of victory was etched into every crack below. At times, I'd catch sight of a car idling at the curb and anxiously wonder if remnants of her old network still lurked, undermining our progress. For some secrets, no matter how fiercely they are fought against, never truly burn away. They simply bide their time in the shadows. In the aftermath, Karen received 3 years behind bars. The construction CEO earned 18 months, and my driveway still bore its battle scars. And on dark nights, I found myself glancing toward the streetlights, half expecting to see that dreadful drone reappear and remind me of battles not entirely won. Now and then, I cross paths with Mrs. Harper. She offers a whispered thanks before hurriedly lowering her gaze, perhaps a silent apology for the times she too had remained mute while Karen reigned. We exposed a system built on greed and intimidation, yet the emotional toll lingers, a reminder that even justice leaves its stains. Maybe that's the real cost of justice. I risked everything to protect my home, and in the process, salvaged not just a driveway, but a fragment of our community's soul. Willow Creek Estates is far from perfect. It never truly was, but now it stands as an honest place, a hard-won gift I struggle to fully embrace even as I bear the weight of every fine, every threat, and every sleepless night. I paid extra to live in what was touted as the safest neighborhood in the state, only to find a war zone in disguise. Sometimes the fight for peace is messy and painful. From the smoldering remnants of my burned shed, I learned that once the flames recede, what really matters emerges in the raw light of day, a truth that's as liberating as it is conflicted. And so, in Willow Creek Estates, our community now attempts to stand together, scarred yet defiant, freed at last from the chokehold of a clipboard-wielding dictator who once believed herself untouchable until reality shattered that illusion.